This story is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. I, 21F, was dating my now ex-boyfriend, 23M, for the last year. Let's call him James. James and I met at college and he graduated last year. I'm still in school. He recently moved up to the city I live near at home, which was exciting because he lived about 3.5 hours away previously. He moved for a new job he got as he was fired from his previous one. Red flag, I know. We had plans to go to a concert in a city about 4 to 5 hours away. We decided to make a day of it and we intended to sleep at his family's house, which was a 45 to 60-minute train ride from the venue and was where he had just moved from, so it was familiar. We parked at the train station instead of his family's house, assuming we'd be sober by the time we get back from the concert. I am not from this area and he is, so he chose to take lead on the trains and transportation to and from the venue. He got us into the city only to realize he put us on the wrong train and we'd have to take multiple subway rides to get to where we want to go. I have chronic migraines and am prone to passing out, which he knows, so I had originally offered before we left to figure out all the train situations to avoid subways because I knew I couldn't handle the environment. He assured me he had it. He did not. I passed out in the subway on a long broken escalator he made me walk down instead of finding another, and a stranger caught me because he had walked too far ahead of me to notice what happened. He didn't even realize I had passed out, he thought I was just a bit overwhelmed. Finally we get to the venue, almost 2 hours later than intended. I eventually took over train directions and got us there as he couldn't seem to get a handle on it. The concert was fun except he got upset and I talked to anyone that wasn't him. The artist we saw was known for fostering a nice environment where people make friends and everyone gets along well. He didn't like the scene, and he refers to not liking a scene whenever it's a queer space. This night was when I finally pieced that correlation together. As someone who's bisexual, it's definitely a problem, and seeing him act that way so blatantly was really upsetting. It's okay if he doesn't want to befriend people. But he specifically didn't want to befriend people because they were queer. But whatever, we go through the concert. After the concert, I asked him if he'd figured out the trains for the way home as my phone was dead and I couldn't figure it out. He had not. We proceed to walk the streets of this major city for 2 hours. He put us on 4 wrong trains and kept getting us farther and farther from where we needed to go. The entire time we're on the trains, he's texting his misogynistic brother about how I didn't spend enough time with him, what a bitch I am, and how I'm holding him back. I broke down at one point, and was pretty upset with him because it was 1 a.m. at this point. The concert let out at 11 and we were nowhere near his house. I begged him to call an Uber, said I would pay for it, and when he wouldn't I just sat down on the sidewalk and said I couldn't do the trains anymore. He finally gets an Uber at the promise of me Venmoing him when my phone turns on. We get back to his family's house at around 2 a.m. I had fallen asleep in the Uber ride back to his house for about 15 minutes and was much more sobered up by the time we got there, as I wasn't very intoxicated to begin with. I have medication I absolutely have to take or I will be incapacitated the next day. It was left in my bag in his car that was at the train station because he had presumed we'd be taking the train back. I should have brought some with me, but it never crossed my mind that we wouldn't make it back to his car. I told him I'd just Uber there and go get it if I could use his keys to get in. He said no, took his dad's keys, and drove his car to the parking lot. Looking back, he was nowhere near sober and should not have been driving. When we pull into the parking lot, he looks at me and decides this is the moment to tell me he doesn't want to be together. He starts crying and getting self-deprecating, telling me he's a terrible person and a liar. This isn't the first time he's done this. He usually acts like this when I'm upset with him to get out of the argument with no resolution. I originally try to comfort him and then he starts yelling. I attempt to de-escalate the situation and told him it was fine if he didn't want to be together, but could we please talk at his house. He said I was no longer welcome at his house because he didn't want to deal with the discomfort, presumably of having me over after shit-talking me to his brothers. We went back and forth for a bit and eventually I just asked him what I'm supposed to do. I just asked one final time, is this how you want this to end? He said yes. He said he doesn't love me and he doesn't want me in his house with his dad and brothers. I just nodded, got my stuff out of his car and left. It was pouring rain and my phone was dead. It was 2:30 in the morning and I was in the only sketchy part of his hometown. I go into the parking garage across the street, because it's pouring rain. There's loud Dodge Chargers circling past me repeatedly. Multiple men came up to me in their cars and offered for me to get in their cars, one man getting out and attempting to coax me into his car, only backing away when I lied and said I was on the phone with the police. I eventually got my phone to turn on to 3% out of some luck and called my mom. She woke up the only family member nearby, who is elderly and lives 30 minutes away, and got me an Uber to their house. She called James, who had turned his phone off, and his father, who did not reply. My phone died in the Uber. Fortunately the driver was kind and got me to the family member's house safely. The next morning, nothing from him to myself or my mom. His dad had texted me asking if I was okay. That was it. Our relationship had been rocky, but there was literally no circumstance that would validate this situation. I told my friends and our mutual friends the whole story, and they all immediately removed him from everything and cut him off. Being away from him, despite the circumstances, has been really awesome for me though. I get to put time into myself and I didn't realize how much I did for him. I found his apartment, car, and job for him because he said he didn't know how to. I introduced him to my friends and family and welcomed him into my world. He really just wanted me to be at his beck and call, and they're 100% for him. As soon as I told him I was doing things to take care of myself, he snapped because earlier the day of the concert I told him about the gym I joined and the diet I was on to better my physical and mental health. I think that's it. Scary situation, but went the best way it could have. He told one of our mutual friends he hoped one day we could get back together after he worked on himself. I'll pass on those delusions though.